introduction to our panelists today. We have two, Jim Morgan and Fabrice Bernard. Jim Morgan is a senior advisor at the Lean Enterprise Institute. He served as COO at Rivian, an electric vehicle company, and over a decade at Ford Motor Company, where he spearheaded Ford's global product development system and directed global body engineering. He played a pivotal role in Ford's product-led revival under Ellen Mulally. He also co-wrote the Toyota product development system and Designing the Future with Jeffrey Liker, both earning Shingo Awards. He holds a PhD in engineering from the University of Michigan. And Fabrice Bernard is the co-author of the Lean Tech Manifesto, a new book, and he is the CTO and co-founder of Theodos, a software consultancy. He grew from a startup to a $100 billion enterprise since founding it in 2012. Theodos is known for its Agile and Lean approach and serves both major global clients and tech scale-ups. Before we get started here, here's Fabrice's book, the Lean Tech Manifesto. Again, I'll post the link to Amazon where you can check it out and purchase it if you wish. And here is two books by Jim, Designing the Future and the Toyota Product Development System. Again, I'll post those in the chat in case you'd like to check those out. Okay, enough with the introductions. We'll go ahead and get started. So welcome, Jim. Welcome, Fabrice. Thanks for joining me here today. So I'd like to get things started. I mentioned that we've begun a series on quality. Quality's been in the news a lot, but Jim, you and I have been working on this design brief series. The idea for discussing quality was your idea. Why did you decide to devote a series, a month's worth of content to quality? What was your thinking behind that?
Yeah, I think, Matt, just as kind of a reminder, there's been an incredible amount of attention paid to innovation and tech and speed to market. And those things are all great, but you don't want to lose sight of the quality, right? You don't want to lose sight of your customer. We want to sort of balance the conversation so that it's more of an and conversation, right? Innovation and speed, but always with quality, always with your customer first. And I wanted to provide a platform for some people that are doing some just incredible stuff in this space. You mentioned earlier Steve Shoemaker and his experiences at Caterpillar, I think are great. The interview you did with my old friend, Jerry Ford, who's now the head of quality at Lucid, around the downstream implications of development quality for manufacturing and also balancing quality and innovation at a startup vehicle company. The incredible conversation we had with Dr. Yoshimura on the GD3 or GD cubed approach of preventive quality at Toyota, which is, bore tremendous fruit for them. And then obviously our amazing guest that we have today, Fabrice, and the just incredible work that they did improving quality software by adapting and applying a methodology that was developed in the hardware space. And I think it's just not only a great story, but it's an incredible lesson for all of us to not, sort of pay so much attention to labels and brands and think about what's effective, what works for your company, and to continue to experiment and learn and grow. And I think that's really the lesson that Fabrice shares. And so I'm really excited to get into the discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. And you framed it up well. In the software world, quality isn't the first thing that comes to mind. It's the industry that moves fast and breaks things, as Mark Zuckerberg famously said. But Fabrice, for the last couple of years, you've been trying to turn that on its head and put a quality first mindset inside of Theodos using techniques developed on a production floor. And I guess my question to you is, what would you say is the current state of quality in software, and why did you think it was worth trying to change?
So hello everyone. Yeah, it's when you look at what happened in software, it's really, digital transformation means there's so many new businesses that started, and disrupted their whole industries by being very good at software. They move very fast. Amazon is an example. Airbnb is another one. Uber. They moved very fast, and they moved also with clearly like benefiting from network effects. So the importance of moving fast was very important. And this is what, and Facebook, of course, is probably one of the biggest company based on network effect. So you understand why Mark Zuckerberg would be the kind of guy to say, we need to move fast and break things, because you want to be the winner take all. And that's the most important aspect. So the result is that on the internet, quality has not been priority number one. And it's still kind of the case. I was at a software conference recently, and the point was not how do I make code that is right first time. It was all about how do I make sure I correct my defects in production very quickly.
Mm.
And I think, there's good reasons for that. It's not because software engineers are bad. It's, I mentioned one reason. On the internet, there's a lot of network effects. So you want to be the winner who takes the whole market. On the internet, there's also it's not fully deterministic. There's going to be mistakes everywhere. Your internet connection might not work. So there's enough space for small mistakes. And typically Google, who it's a company that now has tremendous quality, but they're never aiming for 100%. They're aiming for quality that is above the kind of defect rate you would observe on the internet. So basically, they need to, when there's a mistake on the Google website, it's rare enough that you believe it's your own internet connection and not on their side, and that's good enough for them. So there's that. And indeed, there's this incredible ability in software when you have a defect in production in your user's hands to be able to correct it. So there's probably less pressure of releasing right first time when you know that as soon as you detect a defect, you can react quickly and make sure it doesn't impact too many people. So that's the current state, I would say, of software. It's not horrible because typically Facebook would not be where they are if they had really broken things all the time. And there have been very interesting movements around quality. Early on in the Agile days, extreme programming was very interesting and had quite strong opinions on how to produce quality. And I would say in the last 10 years, DevOps was really the movement that cared about quality and production.
Yeah, but
So
the article that you wrote as part of this design brief series, you talk about an approach that you've begun taking inside of Theodo. Like I said, that was born from Toyota's factory floor, from a book by a guy named Sadao Nomura, quality expert, now retired, previously worked at Toyota. Actually worked as a quality consultant. He went around the globe helping Toyota group companies improve their quality. And the book he wound up writing, the Dantotsu approach to quality, was essentially a summary of his last assignment at Toyota Forklift. I had the privilege of visiting that factory with Mr. Nomura, and I was astounded, not just by his expertise, but the sort of rabid discipline that he instilled inside the factory toward a goal that really was zero defects. And that's something that you've brought recently to Theodo. And so why did you think that was worth doing, Fabrice? And what have been the results so far?
So the context was we'd been on a lean journey for 10 years approximately, and inspired by how Toyota had reinvented the way you can run an organization, and inspired by the fact that they had stood out in the industry by really raising the bar on quality.
Mm.
However, we'd been struggling to really understand how we would translate that to software. Because as I said, the bar is not 0 defect in software. And it wasn't really clear how we would really change the game. Because we didn't really have, like, I think, a good enough role model. And typically, and that's also quite interesting, when you start looking at, because there are like, you know, pockets of software that are very, very high quality, very high standards, typically aerospace. And you can look into their practices, and the problem is that their practices are, yeah, very, very tedious. They make sense considering the context. But typically I had read about the software engineers for the shuttle, and the shuttle rocket, and they wrote about, I think it was 4 pages of specifications for 10 lines of code. So you end up writing thousands and thousands of pages, analyzing the way you coded, you know, really thinking over about your code. So that kind of works. And their defect rate was apparently 1 defect per big software program, which was about 400,000 lines of code. So 1 defect for 400,000 lines of code, that's very, very little. The benchmarks, there's no like very good benchmark, but there's a consensus in the industry that it goes between 10 and 50 defects per 1,000 lines of code. So we're talking, you know, an order of magnitude of 1,000, 3 orders of magnitude. But at the cost of doing something that would make no sense in the digital industry, where moving fast gives you more benefits than you know, having 0 defects. So that was kind of the context until we found this book, Dantotsu, where I think it was very interesting because it's not a book about how you do software in the industry. It's really a book about how you implement a quality strategy in you know, in the Toyota group factory. And we could see so many of the parallels on how we could implement things. And that's been very, very inspiring.
So maybe we can take a step back from just the specific subject of quality and explore more the evolution of Theodo. And it's outlined in your book, but you did not begin the company in 2012 with the idea of a lean enterprise. I don't know if any software company back in 2012 aspired to be a lean enterprise or even had heard the term lean before. You know, the word is agile. And so, like so many software companies, Theodo had agile management system that has evolved quite a bit over the past decade. But can you share more about how the company has evolved in its approach to management and the problem that you saw Lean as solving as you grew?
So yes, we were in software, and like many other teams in software, there was this aha moment where we got agile right, and it was really night and day, and you know, we fell in love with agile. So for us, well, for me rather, agile is this amazing set of methodologies that help you have very high performing teams in software. And what we got from really understanding agile back then was being able to create these small teams and make them very, very proactive, teamwork with the customer. So not only productive, but also like creating high value by being more ingenious, coming up with better ideas on how to deliver value. And that's been very magical. At the time, maybe fortunately for us, maybe there wasn't a framework for scaling agile. So it was still quite new. Doing agile well within a team was already like, you know, was already quite a good achievement. So when we started looking at how we could scale that benefit of a high performing, ingenious team and scale it to multiple teams and scale it also to the whole organization and not just software teams. There was no obvious answer, but one answer we stumbled upon was a lean coach who said, guys, I went through the same journey. So he also came from an agile background. And I think the answers are in lean thinking. And so we decided to try it out. And that was the beginning of our lean journey. So for us, lean really arrived, lean thinking, lean principles really were the answer to how can we scale the organization. So what are the kind of principles and approaches and practices we can bring into our organization to scale and maintain that ingenious aspect that we had found magical in doing Agile right.
So what does that look like? So using lean to scale Agile, can you share in more kind of practical terms what that looks like? Because I think a lot of companies are wrestling with that right now. So many companies have deployed the Agile philosophy. And while it's very useful for rapidly getting things out the door, if you have a large enterprise, it's very difficult to manage many small teams doing things rapidly. You have to somehow point them all in a singular direction. And, governance can be useful for also, helping teams, for instance, learn or acquire knowledge and deploy it faster. But can you share kind of in more practical terms what that looks like inside of Theodo?
Yes. So on that, let's be very careful. It's practices and recipes don't really scale. What can potentially scale are principles. And I think what we found in lean thinking were the principles that we found to be true to the spirit of Agile, but not limited by the size of the organization. But to give you an example, I think one thing that is very, very Agile, and again, not every team is Agile by that definition, but is really having the customer within the team. So having this magic of teamwork between coders, engineers who understand how to build tech solutions, and business customer, a person that really understands what the business is about. That you can read, and if you get that, you can really create magic within a small team. How can you scale having hundreds of customers within hundreds of engineering teams? That's typically where Agile doesn't give you a clear answer, and where lean thinking gives you a clear principle, which is value for the customer. And then when we've said that, we've not given an answer to the CEO on how to implement it, but this is where you start looking for all the books, basically, all the lean books that tell you how do I make sure I lead my organization on value for the customer. How do I clarify it? How do I communicate it within the company? How do I, as a CEO, for example, how do I understand it better by going on the Gemba all the time? How do I basically connect the reality of the value on the Gemba and my strategic thinking? So this is typically things that a good lean sensei can help you on, and that will bring you the benefit of the customer and the team, but at a larger scale. And then I could give dozens of other examples. I think that one is a simple and strong one.
Well, it's an important insight you offered, which is there isn't quite a recipe for this stuff. And so maybe I asked the wrong question there, because even LEI, to everybody's frustration, we do not offer a roadmap or a recipe for people to follow, but a series of sort of guiding questions or principles, relentlessly asked and answered, that should put people closer to where they need to go. I do want to bring Jim into the discussion because, Jim, you recently served a really interesting role as the COO of Rivian. If you haven't heard of Rivian, it's an electric vehicle. I don't know if you can call it a startup at this point. They've produced 2 vehicles, 3 actually, if you count the delivery van from Amazon, the R1T, the R1S. And they just announced 2 new vehicles, or maybe it was 3. I lost count, including one that I'm very interested in. I may actually pre-order. I'll talk to you about that later, Jim. This is not an advertisement for Rivian. I should not go into it so much. But as COO of Rivian, Jim, you had I'm sure a lot of challenges, but you had a lot of very clever people from many different backgrounds, people from automotive and different automotive companies, as well as people from tech, probably brilliant people that all had to somehow align around a common way of thinking. And the thinking that you helped introduce at Ford during that product development turnaround was these ideas built inside of lean product and process development. But I guess what was your approach to rallying people around a singular way of thinking, similar to how Fabrice is trying to rally around his organization around this way of thinking?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Matt, and a significant challenge. Rivian had and still has just a brilliant group of people working together to create these vehicles, and they all did come from someplace else. They came from Apple, they came from Tesla, they came from Toyota, they came from you name it, and they brought legacy processes with them. And so my fear was that we were going to have, sort of a lack of process for doing things. But in fact, what we had was 100 different ways to do everything because people brought these things with them, and were sort of used to working that way in the environment that they came from. And we quickly discovered that what we needed to do was focus on the Rivian way, right? What was the right way for us to work, given the nature of the organization, the challenges that we had in front of us, and our goals, right? We had to align around goals. And I think that's one of the most important things you can do when you're trying to build collaboration and integrate these work streams, or integrate these people that come from really diverse backgrounds, is to align around what does good look like, right? What does great look like? And we wanted to ultimately build a seamless product, right? Because the customer doesn't care about Agile. The customer doesn't care about Lean. The customer cares about the value you're creating with the product that you create, and eventually. And what was our best path forward to that? And so we had a lot of discussion around that, and we experimented with a lot of different ideas. I think one of the key factors in learning is a willingness to experiment in a safe way, not experiment on your customer, but experiment and learn as a group, what was a best fit for our particular environment. In some ways, that was a bit slower than saying, oh, we're just going to do it the Toyota way or the Ford way or the whatever. But what I found is you get much greater intellectual and emotional investment if people are part of creating that enabling infrastructure, right? When you try to understand, sort of what is the minimum infrastructure required for us to be successful at our task. You don't always get it right. You do a lot of experimentation, but as long as people are, realize that and are open to that, it sets you on a path to build something that is a better fit and has a better outcome than had we just adopted something that somebody else did.
And Fabrice, related, as the CTO, co-founder of the organization, I imagine there'd be challenges to introduce this way of thinking that's associated with manufacturing into a software company. What's been your approach as a leader to introducing these ideas and generating success with them?
Well, we benefit from having been on the Lean journey for a while, so there's this appetite for Lean in the company, so that's a good thing. But very concretely speaking, there's been a combination of yeah, showing what good could look like and the interesting challenge it is, and really a lot of work on the Gemba. At the really beginning of trying experimenting with the new Dantotsu ideas, the new ideas we had adopted from Dantotsu, I was actually doing a Dantotsu a day with different people. So we call it one Dantotsu now. I was analyzing a defect with a team leader every day to see to create the engagement, to see also the limits of the theory on the Gemba, and yeah, and to create a bit of a habit and kickstart the whole process. I was strongly helped in this by the strong adoption of actually a few leaders in the organization who carried it even more strongly than I did. And we've done wonders experimenting in the areas with different ways of doing this. And now we're at the stage where we believe we've experimented enough, we've seen enough of the benefits. So now we're like, you know, we're more in the phase of rolling out, of kind of solidifying the standards and then deploying them. So yeah, it's been a multi-phase approach, and I would say the lean culture is really starting by doing it on the Gemba myself to make sure that I was not just preaching good-looking theory and actually not checking if it was working.
So actually going out there and trying yourself, testing the ideas, kicking the tires, and see what's working, what's not working. And something that I'd like to explore, I think, with both of you guys, is this idea of learning. You sort of introduced the idea with the word experimentation, Fabrice, and Jim, you commonly talk about the importance of learning and reusing knowledge, not developing from scratch every single time you go to do something. But maybe I'll start with Fabrice. Do you see how important is that part of it, capturing knowledge and being able to reuse it inside the organization at Theodo, and how do you go about doing that if it is an important function inside the company?
What is fascinating about Agile is Agile really, and again, Agile is a concept, but what you find in organization that have been, trailblazers in Agile is a lot of experimentation. There's a strong culture of experimenting. There's the value of responding to change over following a plan in the Agile Manifesto. So you have in an Agile organization, when you're a cool tech native company, you will have that idea of experimenting and changing fast, and that's very good. What we found fascinating when we started our lean journey was how there was a missing piece in there, which was that as you scale, you realize that nothing in the body of knowledge of Agile tells you how to make sure that one team doesn't experiment exactly the same thing as the other team, which in itself is not the worst, but really when you've made a mistake and you've learned from it, make sure people don't redo the same mistakes. That's quite frustrating. And this is where one of the reflexes is let's implement very rigid processes, and you feel you're then really like killing the Agile spirit once you're doing that. And lean thinking gave us the idea of standards instead, saying, okay, it's not about following a process, it's about knowing the standard, having been trained on the standard, but also being allowed to improve the standard if the problem-solving activities that you do as much as possible on a daily basis give you insight in where the standard is maybe lacking. So that really helped us get the best of both worlds, like the experimentation culture of Agile, and the scalability of starting to like write down the learnings and make sure that people were trained on them, so at least they knew about them. And we've also adopted from lean thinking the A3 as this, writing down when there's a decision to be made, writing down the whole thought process that brought you, the problem that triggered that need for decision, or that need for a change. Writing down the analysis, the observations you made, and then the decisions, which is not only a great way to make better decisions, that was one outcome, but it's also a great way to make sure that if someone else in your organization is kind of questioning that decision, they get much more of the background and can change it in a much smarter way. So that's two like really strong examples that come from lean thinking, and which for me have really transformed what in agile culture I would not call learning, I would more call experimenting and adapting. Yes, once you start implementing these lean principles, you feel much more like a learning organization.
And before I ask Jim, I see everybody's questions in the Q&A, by the way. We're not missing them. We'll get to them in just a moment, but continue to ask. We'll get to them later on in the conversation. But to Jim, you have Ford and Rivian, I imagine, are two very different experiences. Rivian is, especially when you joined, they hadn't started producing vehicles yet, kind of still in the startup mode. Ford, obviously legacy automaker. What does learning look like in a legacy automaker versus a startup? In a startup, you obviously have brilliant people, but you're building the plane as you're flying it, so to speak. So how are you actually going about, what knowledge is there to reuse? How do you do that?
Yeah. So first, let me start by talking about how they're similar. So within a program, a specific development project, the learning starts up front in what we call the study period, right? Or front loading, where the team comes together first to learn about the customer and the context that the customer is operating within, where you start to understand as a team what represents real value to this customer. And even within automotive, it's very different depending on the customer that you're dealing with. So the Rivian customer was significantly different than, in many respects, not all respects, than maybe the F-150 customer that I had worked around at Ford. And so the team needs to get up front, understand that customer, and then hypothesize about the best way to deliver value. And that's where the experimentation comes in. Not only experimentation, but as you know, Matt, in lean development, we talk about set-based experimentation, thinking very broadly and deselecting as we test these hypotheses, right? So we test them as rigorously as we can to make sure that we sort of arrive at the best possible solution that we can deliver to that customer. And we not only do that for the product itself, but we think in terms of the value stream. So we want to think this way across every single step that it takes to deliver value to that customer, whether it's in the sort of product capability itself, or whether it's in manufacturing, serviceability, logistics. We want to think through that entire value stream and apply that same sort of learning and discovery and experimentation to arrive at the best possible solution for that customer. But also during that time, we're thinking in terms of fixed and flexible, right? What knowledge can we reuse from previous programs, whether it's things like standard architecture or platforms or things like that we can build on? And where do we need to be really free to innovate? And that is determined by a number of things. Budget is one, certainly timing, but mostly it's around this specific customer. and how we best provide them value. Then during the program, right, we have reflection events where we pause to reflect, possibly course correct, right? Think about, are we on the right path, right? Do a check-in and course correct as we need to. And of course, the reflection events that we hold cross programs to learn from each other. That was obviously more mature and more complex in the Ford world, because there were, dozens and dozens of programs going on at any particular time. While I was at Rivian, there were just a couple of programs going on simultaneously. So it was a bit more straightforward. But on the other hand, the team didn't have the same history of working together. And that was good and bad. We didn't have a lot of the baggage. I refer to it now as scar tissue, right? In a more mature organization, every time something goes wrong on a program, you think, we're never going to let that happen again. So we're going to put this standard in place, or we're going to make this a requirement, or whatever. And over time, that builds up like scar tissue. And it may not even be relevant anymore, but you're still following some of these things, which is slowing you down, possibly causing you to make the wrong decisions. And so I think it's necessary every once in a while to have an exercise where you start to really evaluate that scar tissue, right? Where you really start to strip it away through, again, learning and experimentation. Is that really necessary anymore? At Rivian, we didn't have to deal with that. We didn't have that, sort of built up requirements, but we also sometimes needed to work on building rails, right? Just to keep us on the track as we went. So, because again, the systems we were developing have safety implications and performance implications and pretty serious requirements.
Well, not only that, but I have had the chance to sit in, even drive an R1T, and I felt very old. It's one of the few times I felt old in my life because I didn't know how to operate the vehicle. I think I was able to turn it on, although I'm not even sure if I was able to turn it on. And somebody much older than me actually had to instruct me on how to drive the truck. But software is kind of it's the heart of the Rivian. I was staggered by how much software was embedded in that. Even the steering wheel, it has two buttons, and their functions change depending on what's on the large screen. And so it seems like vehicles, I mean, if you sit inside of a Tesla, it's austere. They're trying to remove as much as possible and turn everything over to software, which is good. You can over-the-air updates are amazing. You can actually change how the vehicle operates just by clicking update. But I imagine that's got to raise a lot of complexities in development, because you're syncing not just hardware functions, but now you have to embed all of this software inside the vehicle and make the hardware and software get along. Was that a unique challenge you saw at Rivian, or anything new you had to problem solve, or what was the challenge with that?
Yeah, so there's no doubt that software, I love Fabrice's quote at the beginning of his article, software is eating the world. There's no doubt it's eating the automotive industry as well. It's become absolutely crucial, whether you're Ford or Rivian, quite honestly. It's a really big part of what you do, which certainly wasn't the case when I started out in the automotive industry. And so we have had to adapt for that, whether it's at Ford or whether it's at Rivian. And I think also the controls and the application of software capability is also dependent on understanding your customer and who you're creating this product for. Sometimes I think we use technology just because we can, and that's not always the right solution, depending on who that particular customer is. And clearly, Matt, the technology and the software in the Rivian might not have been completely aligned to you, but it's a freaking incredible vehicle. I know we won't do commercials, but it's an incredible vehicle, and the team there should be very proud of what they created. In terms of coordinating hardware and software, I think that is on complex products like, in aerospace and automotive and heavy equipment and stuff. I think that's it's a significant challenge. And not all software is the same, right? So there's relatively straightforward work. Let's say it's a simple electromechanical device, like opening the frunk on the front of the Rivian. You need to get the team to align around the specific characteristics for how you want to do that in terms of speed and safety and things like that. But it's a fairly straightforward application of integrating hardware and software. As opposed to, let's say, sort of a layered and complex safety system where the code is, absolutely critical and you need redundancies and has to work with multiple systems. And, that's a much different animal. But I think in either case, it goes back to understanding the work. Fabrice has mentioned a couple of times going to Gemba. I equate that to understanding how the work actually gets done, right? The tasks, the sequence of tasks, and what the dependencies are between the software work and the hardware work, and creating integration points or milestones or whatever term you want to use to integrate that work so that you can really leverage those dependencies. But again, I just reiterate that the point of aligning around what the objective is right from the start makes this a more successful project effort in my view.
Well, I would like to now look ahead. The future is upon us. It seems every day. And there's no shortage of change happening. In the automotive world, we all know the EV stuff. There's also autonomous vehicles coming out, automotive, lots of change the last several years. In the tech world, it's AI. It is astonishing the amount of development that's happened in the world of AI the past year. And I'm somebody who uses it every day. Google feels old-fashioned to me at this point. And that took a year. So what lies in the years ahead is a little bit I don't know, exciting, concerning. But I have to believe for you, Fabrice, at Theodo, the software world that you live in is undergoing a lot of disruption. What are the sorts of problems that you're trying to grasp and tackle looking ahead? And maybe it's back to that original question that we asked early on, which was sort of balancing innovation and quality. But yeah, maybe start with what are you thinking about looking ahead as a leader inside that organization?
Well, initially, I mean, the whole conversation starts really with this idea that if software is eating the world and really like entering critical systems, the kind of quality culture that we have in digital is probably not enough, because if Facebook is down for a few minutes, it's not exactly the same as if your Rivian is down for a few minutes. And this is the context and then in the search for something better and the discovery of Danto 2. So that looking ahead, there's this interesting challenge of what will happen when software eats more and more and more critical systems, and also designed by people that are maybe slightly less talented than the first early adopting companies. So that's an interesting challenge, and interestingly enough, AI will certainly play a big role in that, good and bad. Good because we're like actively researching the benefits of AI in software, and there's amazing things you can already do today. You can analyze your code, detect defects, find security issues. You can generate testing suites in a way you would have never done before. You can prompt, go everywhere around my app, and if you put the right monitoring on the app, identify issues in a way that is usually done by manual testing or scripting the whole test. Now you might not need to do that anymore. and find edge cases you never found before. So that's very interesting, like in terms of like finding defects and generating test suites and things like that. Very interesting. In terms of negative, there is this, again, it's already happening. Juniors generating hundreds of lines of code at a speed that never generated them before, and without mastering them 100%. And we have anecdotal examples already of very sneaky defects that a human would probably never have written in the first place, because you would have either had somebody too junior to write that, or somebody senior enough to write it right. And all of a sudden you have an AI that allows the junior to write it, but without understanding the subtle implications. So we will detect more defects. We might introduce some more sneaky ones, and that's going to be interesting. And more generally, this is the part I don't really understand and I find fascinating. But the generation that is going to grow up with AI will also accept a world that is way less deterministic than our generation. So maybe the definition of quality will also change. We don't expect a human being to be 100% right. And it seems that we're entering a world where we won't expect the computer to be 100% right, which is quite new for us.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because that part about so it sounded like people are using AI to generate code, but they don't have enough experience to realize that the code isn't quite as good as it should be. But I see AI as it's interesting because with AI you can demonstrate certain skills without actually having them. And so, even I've written code. If I showed it to you, Fabrice, you'd probably laugh in my face and call me an idiot. But it's automated some tasks, and it's very helpful for me. But I have no idea what it says. But okay, I can program an application, I can create something, but I have no idea if it's good or bad. And so simultaneously, you have skills rapidly deployed amongst a huge number of people. At the same time, they have no understanding of how to assess what they've produced. And so at once, AI is granting people lots of skills without giving them any know-how. And so I could imagine that almost I was thinking AI would actually do the opposite of what you said. It's going to fix a lot of problems humans create. It actually may magnify problems that humans unintentionally create, and they don't have the skills to actually solve them. That's one more thing to be worried about with AI. That's excellent. Well, I also want to ask Jim, as somebody who's been in the auto industry for several decades, and you got to look at the future with Rivian. What are you seeing? What are you forecasting with the auto industry, and maybe not just auto, but the idea of just mobility, getting around?
Yeah, there's no doubt. There's already been incredible change, and there's more to come. My crystal ball is a little bit fuzzy
Sure.
in terms of making specific predictions. I've also, old enough now to be a bit skeptical about a lot of the claims that are currently being made. I don't know, maybe I become the grumpy old man or something, but I think the best way to approach it is with open-minded skepticism. And what I mean by that is you should be open to new possibilities. The technology has already made incredible changes in the development process in automotive and other industries for that matter, over the 30-some years that I've been sort of messing around with this. And I think we've only seen the tip of the iceberg. There's more to come. Fabrice already mentioned testing and simulation, and I think there's incredible potential. And so I think you need to be open-minded enough to try some new things, to look at these things. but skeptical enough to test them, right? Form a hypothesis, test that hypothesis in a way that, doesn't, causes minimum damage kind of thing. And make sure it's a fit for your organization. I think that's the other thing. Whether it's in manufacturing or development, there's incredible claims that are made about the potential of technology, and maybe there's no doubt that it can do those things, but are those things going to help your organization? Or is it, are you going to become a slave to the technology as opposed to having the technology work for you? So I think you need to be very thoughtful. You need to sharpen your critical thinking skills, but at the same time, be open-minded and try stuff.
All right. Well, we do have a few minutes left, and we have a bunch of questions that the audience has submitted here. The first one here comes from Jeannie from Pella. And Jeannie's asking, I think this is aimed at you, Fabrice. Appreciate any insight how to integrate Lean and Agile together. We believe it can be an and, not or. Functions outside of software are trying to figure out how to integrate. Any insights you can offer there, Fabrice, integration of Lean and Agile?
I can give a simplistic answer, but first, yes, it's completely an end. I mean, from my point of view, you can have teams practicing Scrum and extreme programming, software engineering teams, and have the rest of the organization working with Lean principles. Completely compatible. Because, for example, one thing we did quite early on in our Scrum journey was we were quite, let's say, we had high standards in Scrum, and so we would track progress on a daily basis. So make sure the increments of software that we were working on were less than a day, check every day how the progress was. And if the progress was not as expected, that for us would be an undone, and we would do a problem solving. And that's one way to be, high standards, use lean thinking, so problem solving culture and undone culture, and leverage the Scrum framework to create these undone opportunities. So it's completely an end, and that's the answer for the software teams. And outside of software, what does Agile mean outside of software is already a bit more fuzzy, and this is why I find lean thinking to be better, because it's a bit broader. It's so yeah. So that would be the simple answer.
Okay, thanks for that. And a question here: will low code or no code improve code quality? For those unfamiliar with those terms, these are tools that allow people like me who don't know how to program anything to develop useful, fairly simple applications to automate tasks. But any thoughts on that?
It's a very good question. Yeah, it's a very good question. It's actually a hard one to answer, because the first answer is yes, because you add a layer of abstraction that's been built by experts, that's been battle tested, and therefore you really reduce the number of dimensions of potential mistakes. On the other side, one of the reasons software engineers traditionally don't really like no code and low code is because all the tooling that software engineers have built around their craft to build better software often doesn't exist in low code environments. And to be fairly specific, you've got a code versioning, which is very useful to be able to roll back, see how the mistake happened. I mean, everything about analyzing your quality issues is missing. Monitoring, basically you outsource a lot of the quality thinking to the provider of the low code platform, and that will probably not be good enough if you want to scale what you're building. So this is so yes, you have less room for mistakes, but you have also less room for analyzing your own quality practices and developing good practices.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question before we wrap up here. It's a question back to quality, and they're asking, is it just about defects in code, or are you also considering things like how easy it is to maintain the code, its scalability, and its security?
That's super interesting. So first, the word defect for us is very large, and we have I love this example, but we had one user complain about a button with the word login on it. So, and we considered that was a defect. Why? Because that person was French, apparently didn't speak English, and for them, login didn't mean anything. And that's typically the kind of situations where the software engineering team will start screaming and be defensive and say, I have nothing to do with this translation issue. And the Dantotsu book actually gave us the answer, because it said it's a defect. You just need to classify it as a defect originating in the team that is in charge of the translation. So typically you could say this is the content team. And that allows you to have stop the defensiveness of the software engineering team, but at the same time, initiate a problem solving around the fact that if you're building a platform for people who've never learned English, then leaving the word login is an interesting defect to analyze. So that's one answer. The other answer is, no, we're not looking at maintainability as a defect. However, I believe that having this systematic approach of analyzing defects is amazing, and it's very lean. It's saying, okay, I'm going to have a problem-led approach to my to my product quality, and therefore I will start identifying. Basically, this Dantotsu approach will bring you to weak point management, and then that's when you will realize, okay, there's this library, there's this class, there's this whatever part of the code that has generated 10 defects in the last 2 weeks or months or whatever. So maybe it's time to rewrite it, because clearly we're not calling it. You don't even have to call it a maintainable issue. You just call it a probability of introducing a defect every time I'm intervening in that part of the software.
Well, we're at time, so I am going to close it up. Again, if you'd like to check out Fabrice's book, it is available on Amazon. It's called the Lean Tech Manifesto. I threw the link in the chat. And for those who joined late, we are going to post a recording of this, and we'll share the links to Fabrice's book, as well as the Design Brief LEI series on innovation. We'll include the links to sign up for that as well. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us here today. And of course, thank you to Fabrice and Jim. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.